Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 3 of Obliquity. This year's theme is Legacy. In a few moments, I'll be going through our presentation and I'll be sharing some thoughts from our team members on what legacy means to them and some of their hopes for this year for our Obliquity season. I'm excited to debut this season. As you know, we're starting earlier in the year, which means that we're able to offer 12 sessions this year. The session topics range from the anatomy of a tweet, art and dermatology, as well as using graphic arts in the realm of medicine. We're also putting together a workbook for our participants that gives an overview of each of the speakers, their biographies, as well as what they were thinking about when they were putting together their presentations, and some interactive activities of how participants can get more involved after the session. We will have more details on our workbooks to come, and they're presently in the works. Notably, as you know from last year, Stephanie Dolmer from the U of A is working on some graphics like the one you see here, our beautiful logo, and you'll be able to see some more of those in the upcoming workbook. So without further ado, I'll move forward as we talk about this year and legacy. So this year we have expanded our team. I'm happy to introduce Timber, who has come on as our community and media coordinator this year. Timber is a med student at the University of Alberta in the class of 2024. As you know, my name's Manisha. I'm the founder and creative director for Obliquity. And we have Ashika Patel, our junior curator at the Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry. So before I begin to talk about legacy, I wanted to reflect a little bit on what I thought legacy meant and how we create legacy in medicine. One thing that I was reflecting on is that I think oftentimes when we think about legacy, we think about what it is in particular we want to leave behind. And I think when reflecting on that, there's often this assumption of influence, this assumption that whatever it is that we're going to leave behind will have influence on a certain group of people. What interested me as I was reflecting on creating this presentation was we often don't think of, or at least I haven't thought of, the group of which we're influencing. Who are those people that will follow the tracks we left behind or be interested in the things that we pursued? So while I talk about legacy for my segment of this presentation, I wanted to challenge previous assumptions of thinking about what we're going to leave behind and instead flip the equation a little bit and think about those people whom we can influence. And I think that figuring out who that group of people are and also challenging our views of legacy and thinking about our legacy more in the present. And as backwards and upside down as that seems, I think that in creating a legacy in medicine, it really starts with our interactions with our patients, our colleagues, and our classmates. And so I want to think about legacy as our present influence, and how that influence can be a means of creating legacy. And so what I'm going to do is I've picked a couple of poems, the first one being an excerpt from a Samuel Johnson poem, in which I'll read a segment from shortly here. But as I read these poems, I'm going to share two with you. I want you to think about when we're relating as doctors or as medical students to our patients. I think we come in with a title. We come in with who we are. And of course, that's important for us to achieve our goal and to do our job. But I feel sometimes that title has influence on the interaction itself. It has influence on how we're able to interact fundamentally with our patients, with our colleagues, and with our classmates. And one of the things I've always been very interested in, and is a value of Obliquity as a whole, is removing these titles and creating space for interactions that don't depend on who people are, where they come from, and what their roles may be. And so with this year's theme and with my interpretation of legacy, I want to tie that in as well and really challenge how we think of legacy And again, as removing that title of who we are and how we're going to create a legacy, and thinking about that sphere of influence, thinking about the people who will be able to receive whatever it is that we want to leave behind in the world and how it will impact them. So I will move on to share the first excerpt from Samuel Johnson. And this is an excerpt from The Vanity of Human Wishes, as you can see here. And the opening line I have up on the slide here, I thought it was a good segue into the excerpt that I will read for you, but I love this beginning. Let observation with extensive view survey mankind from China to Peru, remark each anxious toil, each eager strife, and watch the busy scenes of crowded life. So I'll read the segment here, and I think it's especially relevant to new professionals, and especially now that it's the end of June and the time of graduation, I thought that this was quite fitting. When first the college rolls receive his name, the young enthusiast quits his ease for fame. Through all his veins, the fever of renown spreads from the strong contagion of the gown. Over Bodley's dome his future labors spread, and Bacon's mansion trembles over his head. Are these thy views? Proceed, illustrious youth, and virtue guard thee to the throne of truth. Yet should thy soul indulge the generous heat, till captive science yields her last retreat, should reason guide thee with her brightest ray, and pour on misty doubt resistless day, should no false kindness lure to lose delight, nor praise relax, nor difficulty fright, should tempting novelty thy cell refrain, and sloth effuse her opiate fumes in vain, should beauty blunt on fops her fatal dart, nor claim the triumph of a lettered heart, should no disease thy torpid veins infade, nor melancholy's phantoms haunt thy shade, yet hope not life from grief or danger free, nor think the doom of man's reversed for thee. Dine on the passing world to turn thine eyes, and pause awhile from letters to be wise. There mark what ills the scholar's life assail, toil, envy, want, the patron and the jail. See nations slowly wise, and meanly just, to buried merit raise the tardy bust. If dreams yet flatter, once again attend, hear Lydiat's life and Galileo's end. So this poem is very, very long, and this excerpt is almost about 8 pages. And I highly recommend reading the whole thing because it ties everything together. And obviously, any work is important to read from beginning to finish. But this poem carries a lot of underlying meanings, and it's a beautiful poem to take apart and to really take each stanza and think about what it means. So I don't want to go into the analysis. I hope you enjoyed that excerpt, and I urge you to take some time to think about that passage that I shared with you. And if you have extra time to read the whole excerpt, and we will post that on our website so you have a link to it as well. The next poem I'm going to share with you is actually one I've written. I wrote, I believe, at the end of my first year of medical school, maybe at the beginning of my second. And it goes back to the whole idea of titles. And titles, as you know, have been something that bother me a little bit, especially when these titles give us certain privileges that we wouldn't really have otherwise. And of course, that's part of the purpose of titles. Someone is called a doctor because they've gone to medical school or if they've gotten a PhD. And so in that way, it's useful to give that cue that we know what that particular title means. But going back to our value of these very basic fundamental interactions between people, I think it's important to reflect on that in the realm of medicine, especially in the realm of being there in people's most vulnerable moments and understanding the weight that carries, the privilege that is. And so I will read you my poem here, entitled Treat Me As You Would Any Other Stranger. Treat me as you would any other stranger, and I'll do the same. Treat me as you would any other stranger, caution coursing through your veins. Treat me as you would any other stranger, trust not yet ascertained. So let's start with your name. No degree, no title, nor education may proclaim the right to your dignities. So treat me as you would any other stranger. I'll listen. Please don't be ashamed. Thank you. So with that, I will leave you. Those are my few thoughts on legacy, and I'm very excited for what this season will bring. I'm going to do a quick introduction for both Ashika and Timber, and they have both prepared their own views on legacy to share with you today as well. So Timber has created a lovely presentation entitled That Which Ripples Outwards, Inherited Legacy. And so I'll pass it over to Timber to talk a bit more about that. Thank you, Timber.
Hello, everyone. My name is Timber, and today I'm going to be giving just a quick talk on my take on legacy, this year's theme for Obliquity. I've entitled my talk, That Which Ripples Outwards on an Inherited Legacy. So like I mentioned, my name is Timber. I'm the Community and Media Coordinator with Obliquity this year. I actually did this elective in my first year, and it was an amazing opportunity to, take a break from some of the heavier topics our curriculum covers and really connect with other folks who are interested in the humanities, arts, poetry, and really see the connections and delve into some of these really important topics. Like I mentioned, I'm an MD candidate of the class of 2024, and I first started thinking about these intersections and these connections, I suppose, between science, art, humanities, medicine in undergrad. I was part of the Arts and Sciences Honors Academy, which was just kind of a interdisciplinary class that a few of us took, where we were able to cross-pollinate. We were able to challenge one another and to think about and read about, especially, and write about some of these topics and some of these problems that come up when thinking about a discipline singularly, instead of thinking across disciplines, and what you potentially miss and what can be gained when thinking about humanities in the context of medicine and vice versa. So I wanted to start my talk with a poem. Ocean Vuong is a Vietnamese American poet living in New York right now, and this poem is called Not Even This, published in the Poetry magazine. I'll just read an excerpt from it. I will not dance alone in the municipal graveyard at midnight, blasting sad songs on my phone for nothing. I promise you, I was here. I felt things that made death so large it was indistinguishable from air, and I went on destroying inside it like wind in a storm. The way Lil Peep says, I'll be back in the morning, when you know how it ends. The way I kept dancing when the song was over, because it freed me. I don't know exactly what Ocean was talking about. He's a brilliant poet. But I think a few of the themes that I want to connect with my talk on legacy is that sometimes it's something you inhabit. Sometimes it's something that is given to you without consent. It's something that you're saddled with, and you have to decide what to do with it. You have to decide if you're going to continue on dancing, whether or not you agree or are comfortable with the legacy that's been handed to you. And I think that's maybe an interesting and challenging thought for a lot of folks, including myself. So thinking about the root word of legacy and potentially how this interacts with our current use of the term. The French root is legacy, a body of persons on a mission. So thinking about the collective, not necessarily an individual, a collection of people with a particular goal in mind. And then the Latin root of legacy being legatus, ambassador, envoy, deputy, someone with agency, someone with power, someone bestowing something upon another. I think when we talk about legacy, when we talk about legacy planning, when you see legacy mentioned in popular culture, it's something that we want to leave behind. It's a mark in the sand, so to speak. It's something that an individual makes of themselves over their lifetime. And instead, I kind of want to flip the script. I want to think about, well, what about what about the legacies that I didn't make and yet still impact me on a day-to-day basis, that still have power over my life, but I did not choose, I did not make, others made for me. Since this is Pride Month, I wanted to think a little bit about my queer identity in the context of legacy and talk about the inherited legacy LGBTQ2S plus folks are given. So this photo is a still taken from the film We Were Here, and the man in the middle with the silence equals death t-shirt is dying. He was diagnosed with HIV/AIDS and died a few weeks later after this march. And to put this into context, 700,000 people to date have died from this illness in the United States alone. And we know that it disproportionately affects queer communities, the Black and Hispanic communities, especially in the United States, as well as folks in low socioeconomic positions. However, our treatments are phenomenal now. They're not perfect, but they're great. People can live very long and happy, healthy lives. But at one point, we didn't have good treatments. And there was a considerable amount of stigma and considerable amount of hate occurring. There was one anecdote I'll share that I think is particularly striking, where a man was taking ACT, which was a very early treatment developed for HIV/AIDS in the 1980s. And he was getting on a plane and they searched his bag, of course, while he was getting on the plane, and they found it, and they ended up quarantining him for fear of him somehow passing it on to other people in the air, which we know, and even at the time they knew that wasn't how it happened. So when you think about 700,000 people, I mean, that's a large group. That's a generation. That's a generation of partners, of mentors, of artists that we no longer have relationships with, that we no longer have in our community. So what do we do with this? Well, we usually engage a process of meaning making, of processing trauma, and whether this occurs through art, literature, film, conversation, spaces such as this. I think the most interesting way that queer folks process this through is digital culture, and might be a unique way, through online spaces. We give agency through online spaces, and we give voice and potentially encourage others, even today, to get tested, to know your status, and to decrease stigma for folks who are HIV positive. I mean, in some Twitter accounts, you can actually see people proudly displaying their positive status in their bios, as to dispel a lot of this negativity that has plagued the community for so long, which I think is just such a phenomenal move and phenomenal way to process this. So thinking a little bit more about this digital legacy, I found this this article on Poetry Foundation's website. How many terabytes is your literary legacy? And I think thinking about literary legacy, I mean, you think about maybe Jane Austen's correspondence with other artists, or published poetry. But now artists have laptops and iPads and iPhones and numerous other ways of communicating with themselves, with the outside world, and these are being archived. Someone's Amazon receipts, someone's tweets are all being poured through by researchers trying to understand, get at the root of where this artist may have been at when making a particular poem or writing a particular piece, which is terrifying to think about, but is really interesting as well. Interesting how we're flipping the script a little bit about how we think about legacy. And these are just a couple things that I included, maybe more personal notes. I'm fairly young, so I don't think about legacy a whole lot. This is the acknowledgement section of a paper that I worked on, and just they thanked me for sample collection and whatnot. But this is something that's going to outlast me. It has a DOI link. It is a permanent link on the internet to this particular paper. And that's interesting. That is an acknowledgement that is going to be there forever. And maybe wouldn't have existed when papers were still published in physical spaces and could have been lost or disappeared in some library, obscure library. But that's forever. This digital legacy is forever. And same with my Twitter account. I mean, I found this tweet, my first tweet, April 5th, 2013. I have one word for you: flawless. I don't remember who I was talking about here. I'm sure they were wonderful. Um, but this is also a kind of legacy. Um, and maybe as a side note, maybe more personally, it was also me maybe, trying a new vernacular, trying new words, testing the water, so to speak, with my queer identity before I came out to folks kind of um, in my community. And I hope my legacy is not enshrined on Twitter, but it is a kind of legacy. It is another kind of legacy that I will have. I want to leave us with this quote. I don't want to end up simply having visited this world. Mary Oliver, I think, was talking about her career and her writing, but I'll make the argument that I don't think it's possible to have simply visited this world. We all make an impact. We all exist in digital spaces and therefore have a digital legacy. So I challenge you to make that digital legacy beautiful. Thank you. And I look forward to meeting you all at upcoming Obliquity sessions.
And next we have Ashika. Ashika will be talking a bit about legacy and mentorship, some of the things that we've expanded on this year with Obliquity as a whole, and some of her hopes for this year. And she has a little call to the audience at the end. So I hope you're able to take a look, take a listen, and please, I'll show in the end here how you can contact us. And if you have any other questions or reflections following this presentation, please feel free.
My name is Ashika Patel, and I will be entering my second year of medical school at the Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry. Currently, I'm a junior curator in the Obliquity team. We deeply appreciate your interest and support in Obliquity, and we strive to continually improve our content for you. This season holds special meaning for the Obliquity team because this is a year of firsts. We have expanded our team to increase reach in both Alberta and Ontario. We have begun formalizing our operations, and we have extended our season length. But most of all, we have met new mentors to guide us along the way. We are growing slowly but surely. This year's theme of legacy gave me a great deal to think about. What do we wish to leave behind? What are our salient values that we hope will endure? For me, legacy is closely tied with mentorship. The legacy we craft has less to do with our personal achievements, the monumental edifices erected in our honor, but more so the gifts we bestow onto others. My journey to and thus far in medicine has been cultivated by mentors who have touched my spirit and helped me realize my own potential. One mentor in particular taught me, among many other things, the meaning of art for art's sake. As an undergraduate student trying to find my way both in the world and towards my goal of medicine, I became lost in the pervasive pre-med culture of strategically trying to craft a persona for ourselves that best fits the mold of what we think the ideal medical student candidate should be. My mentor led by example and through words of wisdom. Not everything we love and do needs to serve a utilitarian purpose other than to spark a sense of joy within ourselves. My passion for reading had begun to fade away with the stress of school when I entered my first year of undergraduate education. However, my mentor reignited this interest because we both shared common favorite novels. With our fervent discussions, I felt myself blossom into a more whole individual with a deeper understanding of myself and those around me. I was introduced to the field of medical humanities, and this was previously unbeknownst to me. But my thesis project in fourth year was actually centered around this topic, and I looked at the portrayal of mental illness in literature. It was a joy for me to study and to write about. So not only did my mentor change the way that I saw reading, but she also held an unyielding faith in me that even I didn't have in myself. To become a physician is a great privilege. How did I know that I was deserving? My mentor taught me the value of humility, trust, and resounding persistence. My failures did not define me, and they only made me more resolute. No individual is perfect, and neither is any physician. Both my mentor and literature served to teach me one of the most important tenets in medicine that, at times, I still have difficulty wrapping my head around. Nothing is simply black and white. In the same vein, people can be both good and evil. Similarly, medicine is much more than science. What makes a good doctor? I would argue that communication skills and empathy play a greater role than just clinical knowledge itself. By giving myself permission to enjoy artistic expression for what it is, I was led to Obliquity early in my first year of medical school. Our mentors impact our lives and leave us with unrepayable debts of gratitude that we are obliged to pay forward and leave marks onto a new generation. When it comes to Obliquity, I hope this year allows us to gain our footing more concretely. Alongside our growing team, I hope to see more attendance from medical students and community members across Canada. However, numbers are definitely not everything. I want this year to emphasize participation from our audience through both our workshops and feedback. The greatest impact I can imagine Obliquity giving to our audience is the creation of a sense of unity using the humanities as a conduit. If Obliquity continues to create a safe space for audience members to express themselves and learn from each other, I would consider this year a success. Medical students in particular need to develop coping skills for the rigorous road of education which lays ahead of them. The culture of medicine can at times feel stifling and intimidating. However, Obliquity can connect kindred spirits in this collective journey. As the formal medical curriculum does not always emphasize some of these softer skills, Obliquity can help students learn to lead with a patient-centered lens by gaining perspective and consolidating moral resiliency. Learning from our storied lives evokes a sense of oneness that is critical for a physician to craft empathy. In essence, I want to hear from you. What can we do to improve our workshops? What do you want to see? How are we doing so far? I deeply value feedback. Finally, I hope to continue to see more tangible growth this year. Our recently launched t-shirt fundraiser in collaboration with local artists garnered a great deal of support from the audience. It is completely euphoric to see our audience wear Obliquity shirts with pride. For me, these gestures mean the world. In the upcoming year, I'd love to see more designs released and other keepsakes that we can offer to our audience. As Obliquity grows, I hope to see you all embark in this journey with us. Thank you.
Here we are. I'll leave this up. And so the best way to find out about our events is through our website. We'll post everything on there, as well as there's a link to subscribe, and we have pages for registration as well. For generally keeping up to date and all of that good stuff, we have Instagram, Facebook. We also have a Twitter account. I didn't put the tag up here, but you can find us on Twitter as well. All right, thank you so much. And our next session is on July 12th with Georgia Weber, and she'll be talking about graphic medicine. So we hope to see you all there, and have a great night. Thank you so much.